Hey everyone, Richard Tubb here. Now, one of the most popular videos we've done in recent memory was the video demo we did with Domotz. If you are not familiar with Domotz, the best way I can describe it is as a network monitoring platform for managed service providers and IT solution providers. Now, I use Domotz on my home network with all the myriad of devices around, and it is a very, very cool piece of kit for keeping everything up to date and monitoring all the different devices on your network. So when Domotz got in touch with me recently and said they were doing an overhaul, a refresh of their product, I was super excited to see it. So we're joined today by the Chief Product Officer of Domotz, JB Fowler. How you doing, JB?
Very good, very good. How are you, Richard? So really good to see you again.
Wonderful to see you again, my friend. Now, as I've already touched upon, we've done a video demo before of Domotz, but we've got lots to talk around this time about. But before we jump into things, I've given my overview of what I tend to describe Domotz as. How would you describe Domotz?
Domotz to me is definitely a network monitoring solution. I mean, fundamentally, how we position ourselves is really as a network asset management tool, a network monitoring and management tool, as well as a security easy for me to say, security awareness tool, right?
Yeah.
I think that we see a lot of service providers using us for those three things, and they absolutely get the value out of that. I do want to point out, Richard, ultimately what Domotz is about is helping the service provider save labor, save costs. It's also about proactive monitoring and management across the network.
Yeah. Now, when we recorded the first video quite some time ago, Domotz wasn't so well known, it's probably fair to say. And it was like one of the best kept secrets in the MSP space. Since that time, I've got to say, JB, I've spoken to MSPs up and down the land, and they're using Domotz, and they're like, yeah, it's really cool, and all the different things they're doing with it. So I'm excited for today's demo. But again, before we jump in, for anybody who's not using Domotz, they might, based on the description that you and I have given, gone, well, what's the difference between it and remote monitoring and management, a typical RMM tool? Just explain the difference there.
Yeah, it's a very good question. A traditional RMM is absolutely about monitoring and managing the endpoints, right? The PCs, the laptops, the servers that are out there. That, in my mind, is what a traditional RMM is for. Where Domotz comes in is really around the network holistically. So monitoring and managing the network infrastructure, as well as any of the systems that are connected to that network infrastructure. So when we talk about network infrastructure, we absolutely talk about routers, we talk about firewalls, managed switches, wireless access points, right? And getting visibility into the status of all of those systems, as well as making sure that they're performing as you would expect, right? Through tools like network diagnostics and online, offline status and whatnot. That's the core. But where Domotz really differentiates from, again, other RMMs and even other network monitoring systems is how we look at all of the different systems that are connected to it. So these systems could be anything from security, right? Access control systems, building management systems. In the retail space, you often see point of sale, digital signage systems, right? Domotz is going to ensure that all of those systems are also working effectively for that business or for that service provider who's monitoring that business.
Yeah, and it's important to say the reason I'm such a fan of Domotz is not only do I use it on my home network here, so I'm an actual user, and it's very, very cool for all the devices that are out there, but for the progressive MSPs who are, as you say, are not just doing workstations and servers anymore, are doing things like conference systems, security systems, IP cameras, all of these different things. This is where Domotz is really sort of stealing a march in the market, which I guess begs the question, I've been using the product for a couple of years now, really easy to use, to set up and use. Support has been great. What prompted the refresh that we're about to jump into?
So one of the things is we started talking to more and more service providers, which I have to say kudos to our product development team, our customer success team, because we're always getting inputs on how we can improve our services and the tool. The refresh was really prompted by the fact that service providers need a better way to scale. One of the things that service providers are running into, especially over the last couple of years, has been labor shortages, right? Whether it's just not enough manpower or whether it's having resources that are capable of scaling. right? One of the things that they needed from us is a way to better understand what's going on with all of the sites that they are monitoring, all of the systems that they're monitoring. Service providers are not just typically working with one customer, right? They're working with multiple customers, which, Domotz, we tout it as a multi-tenant platform that gives you that visibility across all these different customers and all these different tenants in one dashboard. The thing we had to do better with was displaying of data, right? Aggregating of all that data on the network. The fact that we look at not only all of the network devices, but all of these different systems, we needed to really do a refresh on how the tool gets utilized and how the service provider would be managing and monitoring those systems holistically. We essentially, and we'll show this here if you want us to, but one of the things that we did is we created not only a customized monitoring dashboard, but we also improved our managing site, right? How you could look at devices, change things across all your customers at one time. So there was just a lot of improvement that gave the service provider the scalability that they needed to be much more operationally efficient.
Yeah, well, I'm itching to take a look at it. We've talked about it enough. Can you do a screen share and we can start having a look around?
Let's take a step back, right? For those that saw the demo that we did with you before, right? What they probably recognize is this screen here, right? This screen really gives you kind of this global NOC view, right? A look of all of the sites that you may have in your system. You've got all the sites you're monitoring and managing to the left here. Simple red, yellow, green type status. If I hone in kind of on the Salt Lake area where I am, you just see that we can dive down into each location individually. Yeah. So what did we change from this? Well, one of the things that we did is we went to this manage interface. So when you open up the Domotz application, you get a lot more data right on screen, right in front of you. And I have a smaller screen here since I'm on a laptop, but you can see as I scroll across horizontally from these different sites, I just have a lot more details and information. The other thing that I can do here, and by the way, you'll notice that we still provide all the same data we did before, but a lot more, okay? A lot more data. One of the things that we can very easily do is start to search for different details. If I put the word demo, you'll see all the sites that reflect the word demo. If I were to put a particular customer name, or if I was to put a particular detail about a site, I can filter on that immediately. Right. Our development team has made a lot of changes on the back end, which really, again, helps with scalability. When we're dealing with service providers that have tens or hundreds, even we have service providers that have thousands of sites that they monitor. The improvements that we made, the speed at which we can filter these systems, recognize changes in the systems, and then bring that to the forefront through the application is just 10 times faster than what we did before.
And this is key because I've been an engineer myself, sat in front of NOC Network Operations Center sort of dashboards like this. And whilst we might think it's really fast, when an engineer is going through site after site after site every day, those split seconds soon match up.
It does. It does. And, I'm showing you kind of the manage interface from a site perspective. So when you're dealing with sites holistically, or if you want to change, all the sites associated with a particular customer, right? You want to add a certain type of alert or modify an alert. You have the ability to come in here and say, select multiple sites and then make these changes as appropriate, right? On the right. So again, rapid management of these. But one of the amazing and more powerful things you'll notice on the top here, we went from sites, we have devices. Right. So when I click on this devices tab, what we see are across all of our sites, which I only have about 13, but imagine if I had, 100 or 1,000 sites here. Being able to search across all the sites really easily for, if I were to type it right, all of the Cisco-based systems. Yeah. But then being able to come down here and get more strategic and say, okay, I want all of the Cisco SG350s, right? You'll notice that I can come under the make and model column and then filter by that and see the status of all these, right? And then all of the details horizontally across this system, right? What are the different alerts I have associated with it? How many sensors do I have associated with these devices? In fact, one of the things you'll notice is insights. So we talked about insights because one of the things Domotz does such a good job of with devices, as we talked about in our last interview, is the ability to look at devices and interrogate those devices deeper. These are switches. So seeing things like SNMP management, being able to do configuration backups and restores, all those capabilities are there. But if I wanted to, let's back out of this. So let's kill these filters that I have here, right? There's different ways I could do that. But let's look at cameras, for instance. Cameras are an easy one where we can see things like, okay, SNMP capabilities, on-viv monitoring, right? Being able to take snapshots from those cameras. You'll notice that we can determine when there's a capability on a device that's not unlocked, right? And we can show that here through our insights. So just a ton of power within this manage interface. And we think this is an amazing change for service providers that want to be able to scale and make changes fast. Agreed.
I was speaking to an MSP recently, UK-based MSP. They've got, pretty much like you suggested, they've got hundreds of clients over thousands of sites. And they were talking about the updates and that, and saying how easy it is now to filter between different sites for navigation. And that makes such a difference because, as we say, many of the, without naming competitors specifically, many tools out in the market are exceptional for single tenant configurations. They're really good for IT departments and things like that. What Domotz excels in, it is built for managed service providers. It's built for this multi-tenant approach. So I'm loving what you've done here just to make it easy to look by devices, sites across all of the infrastructure there. Let's dig down a little bit deeper, because one of the things that managed service providers do, one of their fundamental tenets, is they do proactive support, of course. So perhaps give us an example here about how an MSP could proactively identify an issue before it occurs.
So first and foremost, right, being able to go in and configure alerts on any one of these sites or on any of these systems is a core functionality of Domotz, right? It doesn't matter what the device is. If you want to set an online, offline status alert, if that device has SNMP capabilities, being able to go in and set sensors, those things are absolutely there. But when it comes to proactive monitoring, when it comes to fulfilling the SLA, right, the page that I really like to go to is this monitoring dashboards page.
Right.
Okay. Now, I have a bunch of random dashboards that I've created here and set up for different services, different capabilities that are out there. But here's where I think the value is for that service provider that has an SLA. Imagine creating a dashboard that reflects the most, and we'll talk about two different scenarios, that reflects the most important devices that you care about in a customer's environment. So if part of your SLA is to ensure that the network infrastructure, right, the firewalls, those routers, those switches are up for a guaranteed amount of time, right? You can create a dashboard that shows those devices, and then you can filter by status. Okay, you could easily filter and prioritize by status. So if any one of those devices in that dashboard fall offline, it immediately jumps to the top, is flagged as red, and you can take immediate action on it. So you can minimize downtime or get a better understanding of what's going on. In the same vein, okay, if you want to sort or create a dashboard based off of customers or sites, you can do that as well. Okay, so if you want to ensure that a site is functioning as you expect, create a customized dashboard for that as well. It's extremely simple to do. This is a major benefit that we added to our application here. And it's really, really easy for service providers to set up, not only by sites and or devices, but I'll also tell you that another extension that we made in the last couple of weeks, actually, Richard, is the ability to look at sensors within devices and put those on a table so they can be sorted by devices. So if you're looking at more network diagnostic type stuff, it's just an example. If you want to be able to look at port bandwidth on managed switches and then sort by bandwidth, so you can start looking at which ports or which devices on a port are consuming the most bandwidth and why, you can start to interrogate that. So these dashboards that we've created, the ability to customize them, it's just another super powerful thing. And to your point and your question about service level agreements, this is how a service provider can be more proactive with their customers in a very simple way, quite frankly.
Yeah, and what you've talked about here is the difference between the good and the great in the managed service provider industry, because you've got people who, the network's running slow. Okay, we'll look into that. And then you've got MSPs who can say, actually, it's this device on this port, on this switch or on this router that is killing the network at the moment, and we can deal with that. Now, many MSPs who are watching this saying, well, when is that going to become really, really useful? But we know nowadays that there's mission critical devices running on networks, and you need to go to that level with the network discovery, with the network diagnostic, to actually find out what's going on, because otherwise, as the MSP, you're the one left looking a bit foolish, scratching your head there, wondering what exactly is going on there. So I think that's a great example.
Well, Richard, I would point out too, right? I mean, we're in a day and age, right? And we've been talking about this for 10 years, right? The IoT, the Internet of Things, right? Everything is becoming more and more network connected. We're all wearing wearables, right? We're all carrying around iPads. We're all carrying around whatever, right? Devices that are connected to the network. The interesting thing is it's that service provider that is the one that is kind of guaranteeing and managing that network infrastructure for their customer. The interesting thing is they don't always know what devices are getting connected to that network. Look at all of the voice control systems that are out there, right? They're now streaming audio, they're now streaming video, right? Which, by the way, means they're consuming bandwidth. And if you have a lot of devices that are consuming bandwidth, that is going to affect the quote unquote mission critical devices or systems that are on that network. And a tool like Domotz is going to give you awareness of what are those systems that are connected, how are they connected, what are they consuming, right? And how can I better understand what's going on in that environment? So that to me is what Domotz is really about. And as a tool that helps you proactively monitor that network, it's going to be the tool that helps separate the good from the great.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking of separating the good from the great, how far are we into doing this? Sort of 20 minutes or so before we've talked about cybersecurity. So I'm going to throw it out there and ping you on this one, because cybersecurity, of course, it's top of mind now for every MSP. You and I were talking just before we came on air. We're both speaking to MSPs now whose clients, for the first time ever, clients are coming to their MSPs and talking about cybersecurity certifications and standards and things of that nature. So the client is actually driving the conversation forward, which is a huge leap from when I ran an MSP, JB, and it was like trying to get your client to talk about cybersecurity. It's like pulling teeth. It was a really, really difficult job. So tell us a little bit about the enhancements and how Domotz helps MSPs with cybersecurity, because as you've said, we have got this explosion of devices, and it's really, really difficult, if not borderline impossible, to keep up to date with those things.
Yeah, let me pause the share screen for a minute while we talk about this.
Sure.
Because your point, Richard, is exactly right. 10 years ago, people were of the mindset when it came to security, it's like, well, that's not going to happen to me, right? I'm a small business. I don't need to be bothered by this. But the media over the last 2, 3, 4 years has made it very aware that hackers, right, are out looking for holes in networks. They're out looking for vulnerabilities. They're looking for vulnerabilities in the tools that service providers are using, right? They're going above and beyond. Admittedly, a lot of the hacking that happens really happens over social networking or social means. But one of the things I will say, and you're exactly right, end customers are now coming to the service provider saying, hey, I saw this on the news. I'm worried about what this means for me. Okay, so what are you doing? So I think it's time now for service providers. In fact, it was time years ago for service providers to be very well aware about what's going on in the markets and what's going on in cybersecurity. I go to a lot of shows, right? Different types of shows. And the common question is, what are the tools that are out there for me to improve my cybersecurity footprint? Okay, so let's talk about how Domotz does that. One of the common notions, one of the common tools within any security framework has to do with CIS controls, right? The Center for Internet Security put together these controls, which many, if not all of the frameworks have adopted to some degree. one of the very first controls, in fact, control number one, is about awareness of what's on your network, right? That is thing number one, right? A traditional RMM tool is only going to tell you the devices that they are monitoring, right? It's not going to tell you all the watches, all the Alexa devices, all the Google and Siri devices that are out there, okay? A tool like Domotz is going to discover all of those devices. It's going to understand where they're connected on the network, and they're really going to help you with network asset management, truly, right? Domotz's power is really in not only scanning that network for all those devices at a layer 2 and layer 3 level, but it's also going to enrich the devices by giving you make, model, and type of the devices. Rather than just looking at a MAC address, right? You're actually going to see that this is a particular device of this type. And by the way, here's where it's located within your network infrastructure, okay? So thing number one is about awareness of what's on the device, and it really satisfies CIS control number one, right? It helps with that significantly, okay? As we all know, the CIS controls are really about process, but if you don't have the right tools in place, you're not going to be efficient when it comes to managing those processes. Okay. Yeah. So I talk a lot about CIS control number one when it comes to Domotz because it's core. You need a tool like this. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing that I want to say and talk about CIS control number 12 in particular, right? The reason I bring out 12 is because it is about network infrastructure management, right? It's about knowing the network, being able to manage it effectively, right? Doing things like configuration backups. It's also, in fact, point number 4, if I remember correctly, on CIS Control 12, is about mapping that network, right? Being able to map it is one thing. When you first lay it out, you can do a Visio diagram and say router to switch to firewalls to whatever, right? But what Domotz does is it will proactively and in real time map out that network. So if anything in that network infrastructure changes, if a new wireless access point gets added, you can easily go print that map off. So in my mind, that is such a core value of what Domotz does. While there are 18 to 20 different controls that will be in place within any framework, number 1 and number 12 are critical parts that Domotz really helps you with. A lot of the others, of course, are around security processes, around password management, things that you need to do and put in place. But having a tool like Domotz to help with these CIS controls and all these different security frameworks that your customers are going to have to deal with is a core part of what we do. And I'm excited that we're doing that.
While you and I were talking there, I mean, I've just brought up the Domotz app on my Android device here. You know, my home network here. Now, granted, JB, you and I know I'm the world's biggest geek, so maybe a little bit unusual.
Next to me,
like, over 200 devices on my network alone here. 137 devices online at this moment in time. And the reason I'm saying this is obviously I'm a home site, but what you're seeing in the consumer space is being replicated in the business space all the time here. So I can see audio and video here. We can see televisions, IP cameras, you know, that are across the board on VIF. You got desktop PCs, doorbells, believe it or not, smart doorbells, ebook readers, games consoles. We got heating and control, air conditioning units, home automation, lighting, media players. The list goes on and on. You know, I literally list off just about every device. The point I'm making is for managed service providers, if you are not aware of these devices, by the very nature, you've got a weakness in, you've got a vulnerability there. So once you become aware of them, then there's opportunities there to have conversations with the clients about how you're managing them. So forgive me for jumping in, JB. I think that's really important for MSPs that are watching this and saying, oh, I don't care about doorbells and this, that, and the other. Well, if you don't, you should, because even in my day, JB, anything with a plug on the end, the client held us responsible for, whether we liked it or not.
Let's take that a step further, Richard. So you have all these devices, right? Game systems, doorbells, security cameras, all these things. I'm going to ask you a question. Do you know which TCP ports are open on those devices? On
the devices, I would like to say yes. No, I can tell you at the firewall level because of Domotz, but on the devices, yeah.
Yeah, here's the thing, right? Yeah, you know at the firewall level because the service provider is managing that firewall, right?
Yeah.
So you're keenly aware of that, okay? But what happens when a device gets plugged into the network? You know, somebody bought this device off of Amazon, it gets put on the network. All of a sudden it has SSH, right? It has Telnet, it has other ports that may be open to that device. It is yet another attack surface that a service provider has to deal with. Knowledge about the device getting plugged in and awareness of that is thing number one. But Domotz then goes and scans these devices for port vulnerabilities, right? Now, ultimately, Domotz is looking at these ports as a way to manage the devices, but a service provider should think of it also as, hey, here's a new device with these ports open. What is this? This is an attack surface. This is a security vulnerability, which, by the way, I believe it's CIS control number 7. Talks about understanding the ports and the availabilities of these ports and what's out there. And if there is a port that's open that doesn't need to be used, you better close it, right? So it's about that type of awareness. So that's just yet another example where Domotz can help you.
Yeah, and I must say, from a personal perspective, you held my hand personally, JB, through getting my Domotz account set up there. And again, I'm not an MSP, I'm a home user using this, but I've got a fairly complex network for a home user. I consider myself very cyber savvy, like probably most of the people watching this video here. However, it blew my mind in a scary way when Domotz was installed on the network and the devices that it found and the vulnerabilities that it found that I simply wasn't aware of. Times that by 50 clients, 100 clients, 1,000 clients, thousands of end devices for your average MSP. That can be a scary proposition, but again, awareness is the first step towards security there. So absolutely agree.
Yeah, and I want to point out here, and it may be obvious, right? I mean, Richard, you and I understand networks quite well, but I just want to make this statement. A lot of your better service providers are absolutely going to understand, well, the way in which you protect your networks is by segregating your networks, right? You've got your guest LANs, you've got your management LANs, you've got your video LANs, right? Lots of LANs, right? And lots of segmentation. You may have it segmented to the best of your ability. Okay. But if somebody takes and plugs in a device into the wrong LAN, if you don't have a tool that gives you awareness that that LAN has changed, right, or that a new device has shown up on it, that can be problematic for you. Okay. So I really feel that even the best service providers that are out there that understand networking and understand segmentation and why you do it, they still need to have a monitoring tool to satisfy the what ifs, right? Because as you guys know, right, it's not a matter of if, but it's when something is going to happen on these networks or changes are going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's jump back into a screen share if we can, and have a look at, we were talking cybersecurity. I'm sure you've got things that you want to show me here, but I wanted to get into the nuts and bolts as well when we finish with cybersecurity and have a look at the network configuration details. I want to see what Domotz allows us to see. Are there any new additions, that type of thing as well? So
let's just do this. Let's go back to, in fact, I want to go in particular to, this. We have this particular agent here with some Cisco devices. And in particular, I want to pull up this SG350. Okay. I want to do this for a couple reasons. In fact, let's get it to a larger screen here. You know what I'm going to do, as a matter of fact? I'll click on this, which should take us to the bigger screen so everybody can see it. First of all, let's talk about those port vulnerabilities, right? This is a standard Cisco switch, so you guys are going to know it's out there. But when it comes to Domotz, and the very first thing that we're going to do after we have, done the scan of the network, discovered the devices, classified the devices by make, model, type, et cetera, we also do these port scans, right? We're looking for things like SSH, Telnet, web connectivity ports. We're looking for things like SNMP, right? What capabilities are out there, which is really what you find under like the access management tab, right? So this is where you can set all of that up. Now, I'm in a demo system, so not everything is set up here, but I wanted to point out that for this particular device, right, we're looking at these ports and bringing awareness. This, in my mind, is a core part of that CIS control number 7, which is, okay, what devices are out there? What ports on these devices are discoverable, okay? Another thing that I will point out within different sites, okay? So if I look at a particular site, if I want to understand, what does this site itself look like, right? What are the VLANs that are on this site? What are the subnets that I'm monitoring on these sites? I can see all of that, right? If I need to add things like routed subnets or add VLAN capabilities within devices, I can do that as well. So there's a lot of power here. In my mind, getting awareness. In fact, let's go ahead and look at some of the alerts that we can set up, okay? First of all, I like to go to the personal alerts just because it's easier to understand these systems, right? But being able to set up alerts so that when a new device shows up on a network, whether it's in a VLAN or within a subnet, we can do that, okay? All of that is within Domotz here. Another thing that I'll do, in fact, a lot of people understand this legacy page, right? When you go into the dashboard of the agent itself, right? You can see things like we've talked about. I haven't looked at this network topology lately. Oh, I've changed it. By the way, Richard, I've changed it since you and I spoke. I don't know if you remember my network, but I had a bunch of stacked switches or switches that were stacked in a hierarchical form.
Yeah.
And I decided to, after talking with a lot of service providers, I've made my network a little bit flatter to improve performance. Made a huge difference, by the way.
Oh, cool.
There's a lot of good service providers out there that were very willing to help. but getting this type of awareness, right? Understanding how these systems are changing, understanding how devices on different things like wireless access points are set up and configured are all an important part of what we look at within this network. If this network infrastructure changes, right? You as a service provider need to be aware of that, right? Either somebody plugged something into the wrong port, or things have dynamically changed for whatever reason, and that's something that's important for you. Yeah. Another thing, going back to this view, right, and going back to the alertings, right, this is really where I wanted to go here. I want to look at the network. So being able to look at when the system falls on and offline, okay? Clearly, service level agreement wise, right? If a system goes offline, there's a problem, right? And you should be aware of that. This is one of the very, very first alerts that you should be configuring, because this is going to be the thing that tells you that the service provider's down. Could be a power outage, but maybe something wrong happened on the firewall that got misconfigured that's no longer allowing connectivity. You need to be aware of that so you can deal with that. But then it's also about when these new devices get discovered, when ports get opened, either at the firewall or within devices, right? You want to be able to look at that as well. And then one of the I'd say less known features, but it's still used by a lot of service providers, but has to do with speed tests, right? Being able to ensure that we have connectivity and that we're getting kind of expected performance rates between that agent and the cloud, right? That's something that we can do out there as well. When it comes to all of the devices, right, getting alerts on those devices, we do the same type of thing here. So I'll just pick this particular server here, but being able to see when it goes up, when it goes down, when any of the sensors that are associated with these devices change, right? If I want to look at temperature within a switch or an SNMP sensor, we can do all that. I also have the ability to look at like packet loss, look at round trip delay or latencies, right? So Domotz is doing an ICMP request or a ping once every 30 seconds. And as we see those pings either become more latent or not, you can set alerts on those, right? So this is all about network diagnostics, performance, being able to understand all the sensors within a system. So there's a lot of alerting capability, which going back to our conversations for SLAs and proactive monitoring, this is what Domotz is about.
Yeah, interesting on the sensor perspective. You know, we're here in the UK, which you know, JB, as well as I, we've done so many video calls. The weather's not often good outside. So up until recently, we've not really had very high heat or very, very, very cold. That is all changing. You know, little thing called climate change coming along there. only last week, I was speaking to an MSP who was using Domotz, and they uncovered that some of the network equipment was dying because of the heat. So they could actually say, oh, yeah, this is outside of the parameters. So really interesting there, because, again, it sounds like an obvious one. If you touch a router, it's too hot, then yeah, it probably is the fault. But they could actually see from the statistics that were coming through or recorded before the device died, and it just enabled them to really quickly hone in on what the issue is. Everybody who's watching this, who's been involved in network management, knows you can chase your own tail trying to find what the actual issue is. So having these type of statistics to hand is really, really useful.
Well, and we provide this in a historical form too, right? So this happens to be a temperature humidity sensor that is sitting in a rack in my basement. You can actually see that. I mean, I can almost guarantee you that my wife closed the doors in my rack room, which caused the temperature to get up to roughly 104 degrees Fahrenheit, right, on this particular system, right? I have an alert that will trigger at 105 in particular, but this is just an example where you can start to see spikes or behavioral changes. You can do this on temperature, humidity, CPU utilization, bandwidth consumption. You could look at NAS drives and hard disk consumption. There's so many different sensors that are out there that Domotz will help you monitor. In fact, one thing, Richard, I should show you this. These are changes since you and I last spoke, and it's all around. It is all around this notion of sensors. If I look at, let's go filter on this lab. So if I look at printers, okay, so I can take this particular device here. So this is an HP printer, LaserJet printer. When it comes to SNMP, we have this notion now of pre-configured sensors, okay? Right. So Domotz will automatically detect that we have a printer, a NAS drive. We can look at servers as well, but we'll bring in, right, the SNMP data right on that. So you can see we just replaced the black ink cartridge, right? It got too low. I need to replace the cyan cartridge, right? So clearly I'm not getting blue, right? So I can make these changes, right? But these are all brought into you immediately. So you don't have to go put in that long multi-decimal point number string, right? That's in these sensors. If you have a custom sensor that's out there that you know of, right? Or if you're dealing with a server that may have something custom, you can go in and of course see that as well.
Yeah.
Let me show you one other kind of powerful feature that we did. So close that off. So if I look at ESXi, so this happens to be a virtual machine that's out there. Let's see, hopefully the team didn't change anything on me here, but we can start to download all of the system details on these servers now as well. So we're looking at things like versions, right? What the build is, who the vendor is, but we're also looking at physical disk information, right? And RAM. We're looking at the utilizations. When it comes to virtual machines running on the system, we have a bunch of data that we can show about these VMs. This is something that's new that we've brought in, right? Our goal is not to replace an RMM that is running on that system, right? Our goal is to bring awareness of all of these and as much information as we can about these systems that are running on the network and how they affect the network. So in the last several months, probably within the last 6 to 8 months, Domotz has made so many strides towards usability, scalability, giving you awareness of all of the information that's running on the network. So we think that these changes are just awesome.
Yeah, looking absolutely great. And we've not even gone into the fact that any piece of information that Domotz presents can be used and can be used externally as well to trigger runs of things. We could do a whole webinar, couldn't we, around things like Node-RED and everything else that goes on there. Whole different kettle of fish, but this isn't just for reference purposes. You can actually proactively act on the information that you see here as well. But that's a whole different webinar probably, isn't it? So
it is. But I want to point out, we've got a lot of our users. In fact, just so you know, everything that I've shown you here within our application is really built on these publicly available APIs that's in our portal. So if you go to portal.domotz.com/developers, you can gain access to all of these APIs, which help you list all the devices, understand all of your accounts, look at all the connections, create connections, right? There's a lot of data there. We have service providers and integrators that are going out and building their own dashboards, building their own automations, right? That will take alerts from systems, do automations like you're talking about, okay? Not just opening tickets inside of a ticketing system, but actually going out and creating automations to power cycle things, to reboot things, to schedule information, send more emails out. And Richard, one of the things we haven't talked about, but we should mention here just real briefly, is part of what Domotz has spent a lot of time on over the last year is integrations with the different tools that are out there, right? Whether it's the traditional RMMs or the ticketing systems that are out there, right? The PSA tools, right? We've done a ton of integrations that are out there. I mean, we have over 500 different types of software integrations with different systems that are out there. So I invite people to check it out. If you're using a tool that Domotz doesn't have an integration with, by all means, contact us, let us know, send a message to support, because we want to be there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. In the show notes for this video, we will include a link to the previous video, because if you are coming to this video for the first time, never heard of Domotz before, we've gone through the new features, but there's a ton of other stuff as well that was already existing in the Domotz product. So we'll include a link to the previous videos that you can go there. However, JB, a couple of questions I want to ask from an MSP's perspective. Now, when I used to run a managed service provider business, going back some time now, but in the service delivery office, we had a dashboard up on a monitor, and it displayed information so that, you know, all the engineers, of course, had access to the info on the PCs, but at a glance, you could see what was going on. We've already seen the dashboards in Domotz. Do you have any sort of facility similar to that here that can be displayed in a central office?
I believe that a lot of people love this display here, right? If they are out to use this as a quote unquote marketing tool for their customers, this display is amazing, right? Because if somebody walks into the office, they see this up on the screen, right? They can see, in my particular environment, you see how many red dots I have, but if they can start to hone in on a particular region and say, okay, I see how you're going to be able to take a proactive view of all of my systems that are out there, or my sites that may be. I think this is a very positive screen. Yeah. When I go into this management platform, or when I even go into the monitoring platform, if I want to show specific things and sort them by status, right? All of these screens within Domotz are going to satisfy a particular need for customers. One thing I want to point out, Richard, is you can take and open up multiple web pages. Okay. Within Domotz. So if you want to have 4 displays that are being driven by a single PC and have different browsers that are showing different screens within Domotz, you can do all that. Okay. So it's very easy to show all these screens across multiple displays if that's what you want to do. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways in which we can handle this.
If you go back to the previous dashboard as well, which showed the map and everything.
Oh, sure. This one, or you want the big one?
The big one. That's it. You'll probably get a chuckle out of this one. I was just looking in the top right hand corner. I was like, logo. Who's this? And it's that's where it actually says you can white label it with your logo. That's right. I was thinking, which technology is logo? I've not come across this before.
You haven't seen that one, huh? Yeah. So it's very easy to customize this. In fact, one of the things you do under your account, you'll come down here and add your branding, right? You'll add your address, right? You can, and we didn't talk about it this time. We talked about it last time, Richard, but Domotz still has the ability to generate reports so that you can send out details about the status of the networks to your customers. Along with those reports is your logo, your branding. So you're correct that you, on these different pages, right, you will see, this logo up here that you have.
Yeah, very cool. So I've got a question, I guess, about, for anybody watching this video, you can see that it's fairly intuitive, to get started with that. And we've already talked about, deploying the equipment or deploying the agents, and that's super, super simple as well. But JB, MSPs are typically time poor. So, as a company, perhaps the service desk lead or the business owner will have a conversation with Domotz and be sold on the product and go, great. But then there's the small matter of the engineers getting used to using the product. So how do you make it simple for service desk, help desk engineers to grab a hold of this tool and make it their own and to understand how to get the most out of it?
So deployment, and There's two different aspects here, Richard. One is just onboarding in general, right? How do you get to know Domotz? We've got training videos. We've got this free trial that people can sign up for to play with it. Okay, so when it comes to utilizing the tools, when it comes to better understanding the services, when it comes to, let's say, optimizing the tool for your needs as a service provider, we have a ton of resources. Okay, help.domotz.com is out there. On our webpage, we have under the resources tab a link to our webinars. We do these 101 and 201 webinars, which they're both an hour each, which really gives an overview of the product. Yeah. Okay, so those are there. So I really feel like getting to where you understand how to utilize Domotz is very simple, and we make that possible. Yeah. There's another aspect of Domotz that, to your point about the engineers, right, the guys that are actually doing the deployments, that I want to point out. We've made it extremely easy to deploy a network-based agent, right? Each one of these dots that are on the screen here are agents, right? A network-based agent. You can deploy those through Windows. You can deploy them through Linux. You can deploy them through NAS drives. You can put them on even a Raspberry Pi if you're into that type of thing. You also can go to Amazon, purchase a little black box, which has our software hosted on it to make it easy to deploy. Once you activate that agent, right? Once you put your username and password into that agent, magic starts to happen, right? The agent itself will associate to your account. It will start to discover all of the devices that are out there, and it makes it very, very easy to understand the status of that particular environment, okay, or the network that you are looking to monitor on. One of the things that Domotz has the ability to do is that if this is a let's call it a framework that you are following based off of other deployments that you've done in the past, or if this is, another franchise being put into one of your customer sets of franchises, businesses that are out there, right? So you have a common deployment, same types of switches, same types of setups. It's very easy to take and save off the configurations right within Domotz and template, use another site as a template to this new one. So you can easily just kind of copy and paste all of the alerts, all the settings into that new environment. And now you're up and running within a matter of minutes. Okay. It's not about taking and reprogramming all of these systems and deploying that and code checking. Domotz doesn't require you to have an onboard engineer managing the system, right? Domotz is easy to configure. It's easy to set up. It's easy to deploy, and it's meant to help you scale. I mean, one of the core values that Domotz provides for any business owner or any technician is that we're saving you time so you can focus on the things that you care about, okay? So if we're not living up to our promise of being a labor-saving device, then we're not doing our job, right? Because we're about efficiency and making you as a service provider more efficient so you can help be a hero to your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Very briefly, we've alluded to this, but how is Domotz licensed?
Very good question. Domotz is licensed on a per network basis. There's no minimum commitment. Okay. You can deploy one agent. Depending on where you are in the world, it's 21 pounds, 21 euros, 21 US dollars out there per site, okay, or per network agent that you deploy, right? Our goal is to help you scale with your customers. As you deploy more agents to your customers, we grow with you, right? And we help you. So we have a very simplistic model, right? It's essentially on a per network basis. Yeah.
Well, is there any other features that we've not already talked about that you think we should talk about before we wrap up here today?
One thing that we've talked a lot about being able to monitor and manage the systems that are out there.
Yeah.
And Richard, you and I have talked about this. We talked a little bit about this on the last one. I want to point this out. So, we discover things like cameras. Okay. And this is just a great example. I think, Richard, we may have talked about this. We may not have talked about this, but when it comes to businesses, okay, that are out there, they have systems in their environment, in their network. And especially because of the convergence that's happening with all these systems onto the network, service providers need to be aware of these. But I think of things like security cameras, right, digital signage, audio distribution systems, right? Video distribution systems, right? If you're in a retail environment, you've got point of sale systems, right? All of these systems that are out there and connected to the network are consuming bandwidth, and you need to help manage and ensure they're working right. If those systems are not working properly, then it affects the business as a whole. Even if something as simple as a menu board going down inside of a restaurant, right, or a fast food chain, that's a problem for that business because it's a money-making opportunity for them that is now lost, okay? Security cameras are one of those things where whether you're dealing with insurance, right, you're worried about slip and falls, whether you're worried about internal theft, right, security cameras are one of those things that people need to be aware of, that they are working properly.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that Domotz does is not only will we tell you that this camera is online, we're going to show you that it's functioning properly. We're going to send you a snapshot from that camera. It's pointed in the right direction. There are businesses that are heavily regulated. You know, cannabis is one of them, but there are other industries out there where cameras are a must-have, right? In fact, even for security frameworks, right? Making sure that cameras are looking at the servers, access control systems are working. These are all things that Domotz can monitor and help manage more effectively. And we can help you generate reports on these to say, hey, Mr. Customer, I checked all of these cameras for you. They're working properly. If you do a report like that once a month, you're going to look like a hero for your customer, and they're going to appreciate it. And by the way, right, the thing I should say, don't monitor these things for free, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is a value add that you're providing your customer, and they get some value out of it. You should be charging for that, right?
Agreed.
So for that fixed $21 a month, right, you're adding more value to your customers.
Yeah, and you and I have talked on previous interviews, previous videos, specifically about the security cameras, IP cameras, a little bit like backups, isn't it? Where a backup is only as good as the last restore that you did on it. So, and so many MSP or so many IT companies assume that everything's working okay. But if you're pinging an IP camera, it shows it's up. But is the video actually working? Yeah. And it's super, super embarrassing. And in some cases can be business critical when your client says, hey, there was a break-in last night or whatever, can you get the footage off this camera for us? And you go to it and you're like, yeah, the camera needed a reboot. It was pinging, but it wasn't actually recording video. A little bit like trying to do a restore from a backup and going, yeah, the backup's not worked for the past 6 months. It's really, at best, it's poor form, and at worst, it's going to cost you business.
You know, another thing, I mean, we talked a lot about cybersecurity, right? One of the things around the CIS controls is ensuring that all firmware on all the systems are up to date, right? Making sure you do firmware updates. Right. One of the beautiful things that Domotz can do is we can interrogate systems, look at what firmware versions things are running on. And if you know that an update is needed, you can sort across all your devices that fit that make and model and find out what firmware versions they're on, right? And then you can go off and issue updates. Again, let's call it a service opportunity for you, right? A money-making opportunity, whether it's the critical devices you monitor or whether it's other systems that have been put in the environment, right? It's your job to ensure that those systems are up to date and working properly.
So much opportunity here. So I said at the start of the video how excited I was to see what was happening here. I've been a Domotz user for a couple of years now after JB introduced it to me. I have spread the word about this product because I think it is part of the next generation MSP toolkit. I hope after watching this video that you can see why I'm so excited about it, because MSPs all across the world are taking this product, running with it, and not only shoring up their security and doing better things, they are using it to generate revenue, as JB's talked about. Don't give this stuff away for free. It not only separates you from the good to the great, but it's going to lower your cost of support, increase your profits as well. JB, this has been a blast running through this as always. We could keep going for a long time, but you've got work to do. I know you have. So thank you for taking time out of the day to speak to me about this. For anybody watching the video, perhaps wants to reach out to you or find out more about Domotz or even take a trial or whatever, what's the best way for them to do that?
Couple different things I'll say there, Richard. One is www.domotz, so domotz.com, right? Domotz.com is a great place to start. You can sign up for an account, do the free trial there. If you have sales-related questions, by all means, sales@domotz.com, as well as support domotz.com are two email addresses that we would love to hear from you on, and we'd be happy to reach out. If you want to contact me directly, right, jb@domotz.com, I'm out there. I always want to hear from service providers that are using us, that are new to us. If they see features or things that they want to see improved in Domotz, I want to hear from them. So I put my name out there and my email address so you can contact me.
I want to give a shout out as well to your support team. I have pinged them. I don't know if these guys sleep or not, to be honest, because I pinged them at all hours of day and night, and there's been a response in time. But they are super good, super patient as well, I should say, with an old techie like me trying to find my way through it. But I know I've spoken to MSPs, and they've spoken very, very highly about your support team. So big thanks for all your support.
We have one of the best support teams in the industry. We have very knowledgeable support teams.
Yep.
In fact, we require that our support teams go through a lot of the CompTIA trainings, right? Whether it's A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, right? That's something that we do because it really helps us build a common framework or language to speak to service providers on, which I think is really, really helpful. And it shows. Your point about being all hours, right? We've got support in Europe. We've got support in the US. We even have people that can help us cover in the Asia Pacific region. So you're right. We really do cover all time zones. And our team is sharp. I've worked with a lot of support teams, but they're one of the best in the industry.
Yeah, they're really good. And you've got a great presence in the wider managed services community as well. So I want to give a shout out for that. But anyway, we could go on and on. I'm going to give you a swollen head at this rate. So I'm going to stop here. Really hope you've enjoyed the video. JB, thanks for your time. I hope you've enjoyed doing this. And I suspect it won't be too much longer before we're doing another one with yet more updates and what's coming next. But I look forward to doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Richard.
Thank you, my friend. Cheers.